Okay, what is the median of the set -2, -1, 0, 4, 4, and 10? And this is a great chance to look at a couple terms from basic statistics. And so what we're going to do is let's take a look at this, and of course we'll answer the question. We'll take a look at the mean, the median, the mode, and the range of a set. And the nice thing is this set is actually ordered, so that'll help us find some of these terms. And the first one that's quite easy to find is the mode, because the mode is simply the element that appears the most often in the set, and that is obviously 4 because it appears twice. Then you're probably familiar with the mean. The mean is simply the average, and what you do is you take the sum of all the elements, and in this case it's -2 and -1 is -3, plus 4 would be +1, plus 4 is +5, plus 10 is +15, and you divide it by the number of elements. So even though 4 is a value, it's counted twice, so we actually have 6 elements. So we're going to take 15 divided by 6, and that leaves us with 5/2 or 2.5, and so that would be the mean. And then finally the range. The range, because we have an ordered group, would be simply the difference between -2, the smallest, and 10, the largest, and that is 12, because 10 minus -2 is 12, or you can think of it as terms of a number line where you have -2 and you move 12 notches to get up to 10. And then finally, to answer our question, the median is simply the middle term, and what you do is you order all the elements in numerical order or value order, and nice of them, the set actually already is in order. And what you do is you take the middle term, and in this case there's 6 elements, so the middle term falls between the third and the fourth. So what you have to do now is you actually have to take the 2 middle terms, 0 and 4, and divide them in half to find what the average of these 2 terms is, and as you'll see, the average of 4 and 0 is 2. Therefore, the median is 2. Again, you take the middle term, and if the set has an even number of terms, you take the average of the 2 middle terms, and you get your answer. Now we have 40 is 20% of what number, and you just have to make sure you don't get tripped up by the order. For example, 20% of 40 would be written as 0.20 times 40, and that would give you 8. That is not correct, because we're looking to find out what number, when you take 20% of it, you get 40. So again, we try to set up our equation, and 20% represents 0.20, or some people will say it's 20 over 100. And we're saying basically 20% of some number, let's call it x, or some number, 20% of this x, is equal to 40. So I'm doing it actually both ways. This way, of course, you're working with a fraction, and this way you're working with a decimal. And what you find is, in this case, you can take out your calculator or do it by hand. If you divide both sides by 0.20, you end up with 200, and which of course is answer E. And we'll actually check this by looking at this fraction. What we're going to do is multiply both sides by 100 over 20, 100 over 20. And of course this cancels and leaves x. And this is, make that a 2 and this a 1. And we are left with 200. And here is a question regarding order of operations. As you can see, the numbers aren't very difficult, and certainly operations aren't. You just have subtraction and multiplication and a simple exponent. The question is what order do you do them? And a quick reminder that some people use the acronym PEMDAS. It's kind of a mnemonic, where this is parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. And if you remember that, let's follow it and do each one of them. So PEMDAS says we use parentheses first. So let's change this and solve the parentheses. So you have -3 times -3 squared. So we got rid of the parentheses. Then we move on to exponents, and of course negative 3 times negative 3 is 9. So now we're down to 5 minus 3 times 9. And notice how negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. It's not negative. And then we move on to multiplication division, which of course 3 times 9, which is 27. So now we're finally left with addition, subtraction, and 5 minus 27 is negative 22, which is A. Now we have the perimeter of a square is 100 feet. This is feet. And what is the length of each diagonal? And so obviously it's important to first of all know what a diagonal is. And what we're going to do is let's quickly sketch this. Here is our square. And the perimeter is 100 feet. And hopefully you know what a perimeter is. It's simply the length going from here all the way around. And since it is a square, all the sides are congruent, the same. And if the whole perimeter is 100 feet, then each side must be 25 feet because they are all the same. So now that we've drawn our picture, let's go right to the question, which is what is the length of each diagonal? And hopefully you know what a diagonal is because that's what you need to answer this question. And a diagonal is simply a segment going from this corner to the other corner. And of course, this is also a diagonal for the square. And what we need to do is we need to find this length. And the next important thing you'll need to know is that this is a right angle because it's a square. And therefore, if you extract this right triangle out, you have yourself a right triangle with two congruent legs, which most of you may know that it's 45, 45, 90. And if it is a 45, 45, 90, then you simply know that this is x, and this is x root 2. Therefore, the answer is 25 root 2. And if you didn't remember 45, 45, 90, you hopefully remembered Pythagorean theorem, in which case you would take this squared plus this squared and get some big number, and then take the square root of that, and you would also come out with 25 square root 2. What is the reciprocal of 0.6? And notice I specifically use the word reciprocal as opposed to inverse. There is a slight difference between the two, not so much in this question, but in others. But nevertheless, the reciprocal, quite simply, is if you have x, the reciprocal is 1 over x. And of course, when you multiply a number by its reciprocal, you end up with 1. But moving on to our question, we have 0.6, and the trick becomes, how do we solve this, okay, without a calculator, hopefully. And the way you'd want to do it is I would approach it by changing this into a fraction. And of course, 0.6 is 6 over 10. So now that you have 1 over 6 over 10, we could simply take the denominator and invert and multiply the numerator. And we are ultimately left with 10 over 6, which is 5 over 3. So we now have 5 over 3 as our reciprocal, and we simply have to determine which one of these is 5 over 3, and of course it is not any of these, it is this one, 1 2/3. And hopefully, again, you recognize that we had to do a fraction. You don't just take the reciprocal of 0.6 and turn it into 6. It is not negative 3/2 because that, of course, would be the opposite. We're looking for the reciprocal. So ultimately, you would come out with C, 1 2/3.